Hello, welcome back to Low Headroom. Today we are going to start wiring this thing up. So let's begin. We're going to take this wire and we are going to put it on pin 8. Okay, so we'll count the pins. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's the pin right before the last one. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move that wire to pin 8. Okay, the solution was to get that lead in and bend these tabs back a little bit farther to give us more room. Alright, so we got that guy soldered in there. That's a good joint. You can almost see my reflection in it. It's not crusty looking. So we're just going to clip that excess little lead off right here with some wire cutters, and make sure that when you do clip leads like that, they don't just fall around here. Have a vacuum handy, like a, something to make sure you get that out or tweeze it out. Alright, the next wire is going to be the one coming out of this hole here. So grab a hold of that and let's put it where it belongs. Alright, so the wire is in pin 2. We can count from the gap. Remember, from the gap, the one on the right is number 1, pin 2. So let's solder that in and then cut the excess lead. This guy right here is going to be next. Alright, that one's going to go into pin 7. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Going to solder that in and then clip the lead. Hold it to the work. Feed it through until you get a nice coverage. Alright, we are moving on up like the Jeffersons, so it's an outdated reference. Let's take our next wire. See, we're just going one at a time. 1, 2, 3, 4, easy stuff. This wire here is the next one. It connects to this, I think it's a 100K resistor, yeah. And that's going to go to pin 1. So, okay, here's pin 1 here. Go ahead and snake this guy around. And see, the reason I left extra lead here is because it's quite easy to just come in, take some pliers. Alright, so now that one is in pin 1. Let's just go ahead and solder that. Yeah, that's what we want right there. Let's take a moment to examine our solder joints. Make sure that the tip does not move. And you guessed it, the next wire we're going to go to is this one right here attached to this 100K resistor. This one is going to go into pin 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Excellent. Now if you can, keep your wires from floating up. See how I've got all of these as if they're, mounted to the chassis? That's good practice. Make sure not to touch any of the fabric on other wires or insulation on other wires. Congratulations, your first preamp socket is done. Alright, this is the second of 2 preamp tube sockets. So the next one is going to be easy enough. This is our next wire, the one that's not soldered to anything yet. 1, 2, 3. There it is. Alright, the next wire is coming out of this hole right here in the board. You won't have this turret up here. This is something I customized, so just look for the wire in the hole. It's the next option. Alright, and that wire is going to go to pin 2. Alright, you guessed it. Next one's going to be attached to this 100K resistor. Let's bring it on down. Alright, this one goes in pin 1. Alright, you can see it's now soldered into pin 1. Let's move on to the next wire. Alright, once again, you guessed it. You've seen a pattern here? Just one after the other. Couldn't be easier. This one's attached to a 56K resistor, and it looks like it's going to go to pin 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm going to lift these. Yeah, these aren't soldered yet. Just so I can get some room to put this guy into pin 6. Now time to solder this guy. Happy solder joints. Next wire up attaches to this 1.5K resistor. Let's go ahead and solder that one. Looks good. Alright, the next wire up is this 1 meg right here. And we are going to solder him to pin 7, this is the phase inverter, I believe. Alright, you wanted to put a master volume in, you would replace this 1 meg resistor with a 1 meg potentiometer, which is something I'm going to make a video on later on. Credit to Rob Robinette, of course. If you haven't checked out Rob Robinette's website on 5e3 modifications, please check it out. Alright, that one goes into pin 7. Pin 7. Let's go ahead and solder that in. Curious about the workings of the 5e3, go to Rob Robinette. As I mentioned, that's robrobinette.com. Also, if you want to learn a little bit about phase inverters, check out Uncle Doug's video, Phase Inverters for the Common Man. Any of Uncle Doug's videos on tube amps are just awesome. I've learned so much from him. Alright, so besides the filament wires here, which we're going to go ahead and lay back down, put that braid right under the lip there so it's out of the way. Alright, so what I would encourage you to do is examine all of your solder joints. Make sure we don't have any loose wires. Make sure we don't have any wires crossing or any leads touching any other pins. Alright, time to wire the jacks. Okay, so what we're going to do is take our green wire from the output transformer and we're going to go ahead and solder it to the tip here. Remember, this is our tip on this specific kit. Now, I just checked my other kit and the jacks were completely different. So you really need to look at the wafers, as mentioned earlier, to make sure you're wiring to the correct component. And we're also going to come around and solder the yellow wire right here. And in the prior videos, we left these unsoldered so that we could do this. Okay, so we just soldered the green wire to the tip and the yellow wire to the switch. Alright, so now time to start wiring the power amp. We're going to take this wire here and we're actually going to put it in pin 4. So remember, the one with the notch, right? See that little notch right there? This is pin 1, right after it to the left of the notch. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So pin 4 is where we want to put this guy. There we go. Alright, so now we've got to prepare a jumper wire that goes from pin 4 to pin 4, right over here. Okay, just getting the length of the wire here. Make sure all your other wires are out of the way. Okay. And these are our screen pins. Pin 4 is the screen. So we're just ensuring our screens have voltage here. Very good. Alright, before we continue with our wiring, we need to put our 1.5K grid stoppers in between 5 and 6 on each power tube socket. Alright, you can see here that I actually loop them. So I actually hook them in, almost create a loop to solder into. Pin 6 is going to require a wire. So let's identify that wire now. Alright, this wire in the middle hole is going to go to pin 6 on the first output tube socket. Alright, we now have pins 5 and 6 bridged by the 1.5K grid stopper, and we have that wire from the middle hole right here going to pin 6. Alright, our next wire is going to be this guy right here, connected to the 5 watt 250 ohm resistor. Alright, and this wire is going to go to pin 8, but before we solder it, we need to do another jumper wire. The jumper wire is going to go from pin 8 to pin 8. Alright, so we now have that jumper wire from pin 8 to pin 8, and I've soldered that in along with our orange wire from the ballast resistor. Next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and put that grid stopper resistor right here, and then we're also going to put a wire into pin 6. Alright, so we've got the grid stopper resistor here, and we also have a wire on pin 6. So this, remember, is between 5 and 6, and on pin 6 we've got this wire here, this top hole. Alright, we've got 3 holes, 1, 2, 3, top hole here, wire to pin 6. Let's solder it. Next thing we're going to do is solder the black wire to pin 3 on the second tube socket. So this is the first, this is the second, black on the second. Alright, so we now have the red wire on pin 3. Now's a good time to examine your solder joints, make sure everything's just secure before we move forward. Alright, the next wire we're going to look at is this one coming out of the bottom hole. And I've kind of snaked it around here to the rectifier socket. Okay? It's very important. That red wire needs to go to pin 8. Remember, pin 1 is the one right after the little notch. So that's pin 1 right after the notch. This is pin 8. So the blue wire from the output transformer goes here, and that wire. So let's go ahead. Alright, we didn't really talk about the transformer very much, so let's go into some detail with that. We've just wired the black, blue, and red wires, and yours, if you're building a different kit, yours might be color coded a different way. Okay, so black was our 3.3 k ohm lead, red was our 3.3 k ohm lead, and 0 was our blue, which was the center tap. So yellow and green, of course, are 0 and 8 ohms. This is the input, and this is the output right here to the jack. So the signal comes from the plates of the tubes, the power tubes, goes through the black and red wire in this case, and then goes green and yellow and out to your speaker. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is get rid of these pesky filament wires. So let's go into detail with that next. Alright, filament wires, which I'm going to attempt to braid a little bit tighter, are going to go into pins 2 and pins 7. We've got to make one more braid go from here all the way over to pins 2 and 7 over here. So let's go ahead and make that braid now. Remember, this is the rest of my red wire. I just take the 2 ends, put them together, and start twisting tightly. The easiest way that I've found to braid, we're going to estimate the length between these 2 pins and these 2 pins. It's okay if it's a little longer to be safe, but we don't want it too much longer. Filament wires are what introduce the most noise in these amps, or a lot of the noise, if you don't braid the wires correctly. Alright, so that looks like it's going to do. So let's go ahead and strip those and do some soldering. So our filament wire looks good. We got it braided going to pins 2 and 7. I gotta cut that little lead there. That's very important to do. And then I'm not gonna solder it here yet, and the reason why is because we're gonna be doing one more braid from this socket to the pilot light. So we're going to keep it like that. We're also going to keep the rectifier as is with the blue and red wire going here. And we are going to move to the pots. In part 5 we will be doing the power transformer and the switches. Alright, I've turned the chassis over. We're now gonna start wiring the pots, jacks, and all of this good stuff here. First thing I'm gonna do is kind of get all my wires out of the way so that I have good visibility. And the first wire I'm gonna take care of is this ground wire here. Alright, it's a little hard to see here with the other wires, but this blue wire that's coming out from underneath the board is going to be soldered right here to that scored area that we did with the Dremel. So let's go ahead, and the technique to doing this is to get the metal nice and hot and just throw in a lot of solder at it. I'll see if I can film it here. I've used my helping hand to ensure that it is kind of held down so that it does not raise. So I'm going to apply a lot of heat here, hold it there for a minute. I wish I had like the Gitologist has one called Big Bertha, which is just an awesome name for a solderer. Alright, that looks like it's gonna hold okay. Alright, we're gonna create a little grounding scheme now. Remember those 3 blue wires that we had coming out from underneath the board and one through this hole here? We're gonna connect those to all 3 pots, and we're also gonna put an additional bare grounding wire, bus wire, across these 3. So let's begin. Alright, I want to show you an example of this soldering technique that I've found works best. What you're going to do is actually hold your soldering iron on the wire itself, not the pot, and let it drip down onto the pot. Eventually the heat will cause it to just drip down and you'll get a nice solid connection. Alright, your ground bus should look something like this when you're done. Tone cap's grounded, this wire is grounded here, this wire is grounded to the second pot, this wire is grounded to the third, and we've got this nice ground bus going along. Okay, the first thing we want to do is, I forgot about this ground wire here. We also want to ground that to the pot. One note about this wire here, a little oversight of mine, we may need to ground this to an area over here. Depends on how good the ground is. I'm hoping it's a good ground, but we'll see. Alright, what I'm going to do here is actually create an additional ground wire that's eventually going to be grounded right here. So I'm just going to solder this wire into my ground bus. Alright, so I got that extra wire, that ground wire right on there, and this is going to go directly to our ground bolts. Alright, the first wire we're going to solder is the one coming out from the hole, and it's our first option. And that wire is going to go right here. We have that red wire that we soldered in the prior video, going from this terminal to this terminal. Alright, those are soldered in. Now, we move to the next wire that's available to us, which is this one here. That one's actually going to go right here in the middle of the middle pot. Right where that bright cap is. Now our next wire is going to be the next available one. And this one is actually going to go to the bottom jack on the tip. Tip is the largest one. But yes, this wire to the tip. Alright, that wire under that 68K resistor is in the tip there. So now we move on to the next wire, which is this one right here on this other 68K resistor. Alright, that 68K resistor wire went right to the tip of the top jack. Next wire comes out of this 0.1 microfarad capacitor. Alright, and that one is going to go to the middle of the first volume pot, and we're going to tuck that wire under the lip as well, just to be neat. Okay, so we are on the last 2 wires here, and they are with the 68K grid stoppers for first channel. So let's go ahead and get these done. Alright, the first one goes to the tip of the bottom jack. The second one goes to the tip of the top jack. And you'll remember we left these unsoldered in the last video, and what these have in them is our input resistor. They've also got our connection to our other jack here, and now they will have this other wire coming from the 68K resistor. Alright, so let's go ahead and solder those in. Alright, we got it soldered here and here, not the prettiest solder joint. The solder was running hot and kept running. Okay, that's it for part 4 of the series. Next time we will go and take on the power transformer, the pilot light, and the switches, and the fuse, and the power cord. And then we'll be done. We'll be able to test it out. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe or like to help this channel grow. I plan on doing more tutorials, and just more amp repair, etc. And it'd be great to get some support. So thank you.